This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invites you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us about an exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective Sherlock Holmes. And now let's drop in on the good Dr. Watson, who's waiting for us in his California ranch house. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Foreman. Come in and make yourself at home.
Thank you, Doctor. Sitting here with the lights off, I see. Have you been getting yourself in the mood for tonight's Sherlock Holmes story?
No, my boy, I was watching the sunset. It's quite a beautiful tonight.
Aye, Doctor, the sun set over an hour ago.
Yes, I know that, young fellow, my lad. I know that. But at my age, a fellow's entitled to take a little snooze after dinner, isn't he?
Of course he is, Doctor. And now that we've settled that, how about tonight's story?
Well, a very beautiful girl figured prominently in this adventure, Mr. Foreman. Her name was Jasmine Lafleur.
Huh? You say that again, Doctor, please?
I know, my boy, but that was her stage name. When she was a magician's assistant. Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity of seeing Jasmine Lafleur in the theater. But I'm told that she was a fascinating figure in tights and spangles. When Holmes and I first met her, however, she was dressed a little more conventionally. And her name was then Diana Vennering. Lady Vennering.
Lady Vennering? Say, those tights and spangles really paid off, didn't they? Well, how did you and Sherlock Holmes come to meet up with her, Doctor?
In rather spectacular style, Mr. Foreman. Miss Lafleur became something of a femme fatale in the early 1900s. First of all, she married Signor Rossoni, the magician for whom she was working. On the wedding night, he was mysteriously stabbed to death. A few months later, Madame Rossoni, very fetching in her widow's weeds, I'm sure, met Sir Wilfrid Vennering. And, after a whirlwind courtship, she married him.
Don't tell me he got murdered, too.
He did, Mr. Foreman. Also on the night of the wedding. But this time the police found a suspect. It was a certain Major Beckworth, cousin of the dead man, and an ardent suitor of the fair Diana. The trial at the Old Bailey was one of the most sensational I ever remember. Sherlock Holmes and I, in court on the closing day as a jury, were still considering their verdict. Holmes, the jury's been out over 8 hours. I bet you they can't agree on a verdict and there'll be a new trial.
I think not, old chap. Look, here they come now. You know, there's a strong moral probability of guilt, but I'm sure they'll agree that there's insufficient evidence to convict.
Oh, perhaps you're right. Just look at Lady Vennering down there ahead of us. What a stunning woman.
Yes, and a woman of great poise and courage.
Here it comes.
Gentlemen of the jury, have you arrived at a verdict?
We have, my lord.
How say you? You find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Exactly. Come on, Watson. Let's get a breath of fresh air.
Well, I was wondering perhaps if we shouldn't go over and congratulate Lady Vennering.
On what? The fact that our husband's murderer has not been found?
Oh, I suppose you're right.
You ever read the book of Tobit, Watson?
Tobit? I don't think so. When was it published?
Oh, a little before our time, old chap. It's an Old Testament story.
Whatever made you think of it at this moment?
Well, it's so remarkably apposite with the case of Lady Vennering. It deals with a highly peculiar series of murders, 7 of them, if I remember correctly.
Who was the murderer?
A jealous demon by the name of Asmodeus, who strangled husbands on their wedding nights.
Well, judging by the verdict just now, Major Beckworth isn't the Asmodeus, or whatever you call him in this case.
Here you are, boy. Here, give me a paper.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. Paper!
Well, Holmes, what does it say?
Oh. Wait a minute. Here we are. Listen to this. Lady Vennering, widow of the murdered man, says that she will marry the suspect. Lady Vennering told newspaper reporters this afternoon that if Major Beckworth is acquitted, she will marry him before the year is out.
Oh, upon my soul, Holmes, there's a positive sparkle in your eyes. You read about her.
I must admit the lady fascinates me, old chap. I hope before she becomes involved in any further tragedies that we may have the opportunity of meeting her. And something tells me that we will.
Sunday papers are certainly having a field day over the Veneering case, Holmes. Did you read them?
No, I didn't, Watson.
There's a complete life history of Lady Veneering in one of them with photographs. It's rather interesting.
Really?
What are you doing over there, Holmes?
Looking out of the window. Ah, yes.
You expecting anybody home?
No, come over here, old fellow.
Oh, it's a clergyman.
Yes, a very agitated one. Look at the way he's pacing up and down. And looking up at our window, too.
By Jove. What eyes.
Yes, there's a fanatical look about him, which suggests either the martyr at the stake or the inquisitor lighting the faggots.
Mrs. Hudson's letting him in now. Well, I'll be interested to know what he's come to us about. I can hear footsteps on the stairs here. I'll go and have a look. How do you do, sir? Come along in, won't you? It's all right, thank you, Mrs. Hudson.
You're Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
I am, sir, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson.
My name is Whalen, the Reverend Arthur Whalen.
How do you do,
How
sir?
do you do, sir?
Sit down, won't you, and tell me what I can do for you.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes, this is a very difficult subject to broach. In fact, it's only after intense personal conflict that I've been able to force myself to come to you. May I ask you, are you familiar with the Book of Tobit?
Book of Tobit? Gracious me. You were talking about that yesterday, Holmes.
I see that you've come to consult me about the Veneering case.
But that's amazing. How did you know? Has Lady Veneering been in touch with you?
No, sir, but I'm familiar with the Book of Tobit. And Lady Venering's case closely resembles that of the woman Sarah in the Old Testament story.
More closely than you realize, Mr. Holmes. Did you know that before each one of Lady Venering's husbands was killed, they received a threatening note?
Yes, I recall that from the trial.
Signed in some sort of gibberish, weren't they, sir?
No, Doctor. Yesterday I was permitted for the first time to examine one of these notes. The apparent gibberish was in reality ancient Hebrew writing.
Indeed. Were you able to translate it?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. In effect, it said, if you go through with this marriage, your hours are numbered. And it was signed Asmodeus.
Oh. The name of the jealous demon who strangled husbands in the Book of Tobit.
Exactly.
Just why have you come to me, sir?
I want you to talk to Diana, to Lady Veneering, to tell her she must not go through with this new marriage. Murder is stalking her, Mr. Holmes. I have argued with her, prayed with her, implored her to realize her danger. But she is adamant.
I'm afraid I should feel extremely presumptuous in giving her my advice.
No, Mr. Holmes. I have prepared the way for you. You could, I'm sure, make her realize her danger.
And she's willing to see me, you say?
Willing and anxious.
Oh, very well. But I'd like to ask you a few questions first.
Anything, Mr. Holmes.
What is your interest in her?
She's a member of my flock. She needs my guidance.
Nothing further?
No, Mr. Holmes.
I believe that you performed the marriage ceremony at both of her previous weddings.
Yes?
Are you proposing to officiate the ceremony if she marries Major Beckwith?
Well, I don't know. I'm hoping that marriage will never take place. And so I want you to help me, Mr. Holmes.
Where does the lady live?
47, Berkeley Square.
Very well. Dr. Watson and I will call on her this afternoon.
Delighted to.
I doubt if I can be there myself. In fact, Diana might speak more freely if I'm not. But here's my card.
Oh, thank you.
You'll know where to get in touch with me if you want to.
Very well, sir.
Good day to you, gentlemen. And I'm greatly in your debt.
Well, good day, sir, good day. Strange business, Holmes. I can't believe that Mr. Whalen's motives are entirely impersonal.
Nor can I, old chap.
What are you laughing about?
I was thinking of the Book of Tobit, Watson.
Tobit?
In that the role of protector, the role I have just been asked to take, was played by the Archangel Raphael. I can't help feeling, Watson, that I'm making distinct strides in my profession.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes. I'm so glad to meet you.
How do you do, Lady Veneering? May I introduce my old friend, Dr. Watson?
How are you, Dr. Watson?
I'm awfully glad to meet you, Lady Veneering.
Let's sit down, shall we? You're just in time for tea.
Thank you. You know why we're here, of course.
Oh, naturally. Mr. Whalen came round here as soon as he'd left you. You're to persuade me to look after my mortal affairs, while he takes care of my immortal ones. Isn't that it?
Well, that's charmingly put, Lady Veneering. Charming.
May I say, Mr. Holmes, that I'm flattered that a man of your eminence should be sufficiently interested to bother about me.
You underestimate your own importance, Lady Veneering. Though I may mention that if your problem had been as simple as Mr. Whalen made it out to be, I might have been otherwise engaged.
You're being very frank and a little mysterious. Are you suggesting that Mr. Whalen didn't tell you everything?
I am, and I hope you will be more candid with me.
Sherlock Holmes, I like you. You're most refreshing. Milk and sugar in your tea?
Just milk, thank you.
Here you are. How about you, Dr. Watson?
Oh, just the same way, please. Hey, thank you, my dear.
And now, Mr. Holmes, perhaps you'll tell me why you think that you haven't been told everything.
Before I answer that, Lady Vennering, I wonder if I might ask you some questions.
But of course. Anything.
When your first husband, Signor Rossoni, was killed, did the police find any suspects?
Yes, one. Ferdinand Gautier, a young man who had been an assistant in our Magician's Act. A stupid, good-looking boy who thought he was in love with me. But of course Inspector Lestrade had to release him. There was no evidence.
Inspector Lestrade, well, you can bet that if he arrested him, the boy was innocent.
A warning note was found among your husband's effects, wasn't it?
Yes, and it was signed in Hebrew with the name Asmodeus. But perhaps you're not familiar with the Book of Tobit.
Oh, yes, sir, I am. I'm familiar with it, Lady Vennering. How did you know then that the Hebrew letters signified that name?
Mr. Whalen translated them for me.
Oh, I see.
And also read me the Book of Tobit. He's always been particularly fond of that book. Perhaps because it illustrates his own ideas on the dangers of marriage.
But Holmes told us that he hadn't seen one of the warning notes until yesterday.
Precisely. Lady Vennering, I read in the papers that you intend to marry Major Beckwith, the man who has just been tried for your late husband's murder.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
When are you going to marry him, may I ask?
When it pleases me.
Doesn't it occur to you that a great deal of comment will be caused? Also that Major Beckwith's life is in obvious danger?
Of course it occurs to me, my dear man. But because of two tragic marriages, am I to spend the rest of my life alone? As Mr. Whalen would have me do? I'm young, alive. Peter, what are you doing here?
I just arrived back in England today, Diana. What's this I read about you marrying Beckwith?
Peter, I have guests. Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. This is Peter McComas, one of our most promising young painters.
Diana, tell me it isn't true. When I left England, you loved me, and I you. I come back, and what do I find? You're planning to marry Beckwith. Well, I won't stand for it. If you think you can throw me over like some silly boy, you're very much mistaken. I can tell things, you know. I can tell lots of things.
Get out of here, Peter. Get out.
Diana.
And don't come back until you've learned manners and discretion.
But Diana...
Get out. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Were there any more questions you wanted to ask me, Mr. Holmes?
One, Lady Vennering. Where is your fiancé, Major Beckwith?
He's upstairs. I'm letting him stay here until the scandal of the trial has died down.
I must see him at once.
At once? Why, Holmes? He's in no danger until the marriage takes place?
The marriage has taken place, Watson, unless I'm very much mistaken.
What makes you think so, Mr. Holmes?
You're much too discreet and intelligent, Lady Vennering, to let him stay here in your house unless you were already married.
We were married this morning. But we planned to keep the fact a secret for a few months until the scandal had died down.
May I talk to him, please?
Of course. I'll ring for the butler and ask him to come down.
May I ask, madam, who married you?
The Reverend Arthur Whalen, of course.
Oh, and all the time he talked to us today, he knew perfectly well that this marriage had taken place. He must have just come from it. I don't trust that man, Holmes.
Oh, there you are, Hudson. I just rang for you. Will you ask Major Beckwith?
Excuse me, lady. I was just on my way to telephone the police.
The police? What do you mean?
It's Major Beckwith, milady. He's been stabbed to death in his bath.
Mr. Beckwith murdered, too.
Hudson, I'll telephone the police. By now, I'm rather well acquainted with Inspector Lestrade. Excuse me, gentlemen.
A dreadful business, Holmes. A third husband murdered on his wedding day.
But what a woman, Watson. She's superb, magnificent.
What on earth do you mean, Holmes?
What courage. What unconquerable spirit in the face of a fresh tragedy. Watson, she fascinates me.
I haven't seen such a splendid female since we solved that case for the King of Bohemia.
And now back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. The famous detective and his old friend Dr. Watson have become involved in the affairs of thrice-married Diana, one-time magician's assistant. Each of her husbands has been mysteriously murdered on his wedding day, the latest murder occurring on the same day that Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are brought into the case. As we rejoin our story, it's a month later, and for some obscure reason, Sherlock Holmes seems to have lost interest in the case, though not in the beautiful Diana.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes, Lestrade?
It's over a month now since Major Beckwith was murdered, and we haven't found a single clue to it.
Do you expect me to supply the deficiencies of Scotland Yard?
Well, it's unlike you not to help us, Mr. Holmes. And after all, you and Dr. Watson were in the house when it happened. If you ask me, the murderer's either McComas, that Irish painter, or the clergyman Whalen. What do you think, sir?
As far as I'm concerned, the case is closed, Lestrade, and I wish you'd stop bothering me. What do you think I am? Nothing but a detecting machine?
Mr. Holmes, whatever's come over you?
Holmes, you're not going out again this evening, are you?
I'm afraid so, old chap.
Well, this will be the fourth night in a row. I was hoping that we might have a nice, quiet evening in front of the fire.
Oh, I'm sorry, Watson, but I promised to take Diana to the horse show at Olympia. I should be home by midnight.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes, Mr. Whalen?
You're seeing altogether too much of Diana. She seems to be completely under your spell.
But you introduced me to her in the first place, with the request that I keep an eye on her.
I made a great mistake. As her spiritual protector, I'm afraid I must ask you to stop seeing her.
I'm afraid I must ask you, sir, to mind your own business.
I say, Holmes, have you seen in the paper that violinist, this Iway, is playing at the Albert Hall tonight?
No, I haven't looked at the paper today.
Oh, I thought perhaps that we might go along and see
I'm
him
afraid
together.
I can't, old chap. No, I'm taking Diana to the French Maid at Dahlia's Theatre. I hear it's a charming musical comedy.
Look here, Holmes. We've been friends for a good many years now.
Very true, old fellow.
And I think I'm entitled to speak to you straight from the shoulder.
Of course you are, Watson.
Very well, then. This Diana Beckworth.
Oh.
Yes, it's your own business, I suppose, but I can't bear to see her making such a fool of you. You've neglected your work entirely since you met her. You get about as though you were a young fellow of 20. What's come over you, Holmes?
Stop pacing about, old chap, will you, and sit down. In fact, it might be a good idea if you fortified yourself with a nip of brandy from the Tantalus there. What I'm about to tell you may be something of a shock. Watson, Diana and I are getting married tomorrow.
What did you say, Holmes?
I'm getting married tomorrow.
But, you're insane.
Oh, that's not very flattering, Watson. Anyway, I don't see why you should be so surprised. You yourself married and left Baker Street once, didn't you?
For you, Holmes, a confirmed woman hater.
No, my dear Watson. No, indeed, no. You will remember in our adventure that you titled A Scandal in Bohemia, I met a lady that I have often referred to as, the woman.
You mean Irene Adler, but she was a criminal.
Exactly, and yet Diana has the same magnificent characteristics. Keen intelligence, courage, and unconquerable spirit.
But Holmes, 3 of her husbands murdered on their wedding nights. You're proposing to be the 4th.
Oh, rubbish, my dear fellow, because tragedy has attended her previous marriages. Is she to go through life alone?
Holmes, you really mean it, don't you?
Of course I do.
I think I will have a nip of brandy.
Oh, don't take it so badly, old fellow. We'll continue to see a lot of each other. Diana's very fond of you, you know.
Oh, well, I'm glad. Who's going to perform the ceremony? Not the Reverend Mr. Whalen?
Oh, no. We decided, in view of Diana's previous marriages, that he might prove to be a trifle, unlucky. A clergyman named Viennese will officiate. Whalen, of course, insists on being present just the same.
What time is the wedding tomorrow?
2 o'clock, old fellow. Oh, I should have mentioned this before. I hope your cutaway coat and top hat are in a good state of preservation. You'll be a pretty prominent figure at the ceremony, you know.
You mean that...
Well, I mean that if Sherlock Holmes gets married, who else can be his best man but his old friend, Dr. Watson? It's elementary, my dear fellow, elementary.
I now pronounce you man and wife, and those whom God hath joined together, let no man put asunder.
Diana, I'm going to claim the privilege of the best man and give you a kiss.
Of course you shall, Doctor.
It's you, Holmes. You devilish lucky fellow.
Of course I am, old chap.
Sherlock, I'm going upstairs to change my dress now.
Very well, Diana. I'll be up shortly.
I'll see you later, Dr. Watson.
Very well, Mrs. Holmes. You know, Holmes, I never thought I'd live to say that.
Watson, old fellow, I'm worried.
Worried today? Oh, my dear fellow, what's the matter?
Well, just before the ceremony, I received one of those warning notes signed by Asmodeus.
Oh, you better be careful, Holmes.
I think I'll slip out and have a pipe or two on the matter. Yes. Look after my guests for me, will you? And keep your eyes open. And your ears.
Yes, I will indeed. There you are, Mr. Whalen. Would you care for a glass of champagne or punch or something or other?
Thank you, no, Doctor. I'm in no mood for celebration. I'm certain that Diana has made a shocking mistake.
Well, really, sir, I don't think...
I only came here in a last-minute attempt to dissuade her. Now that I've failed, I shall leave. Good day, sir.
Bless your soul.
Dr. Watson?
Oh, hello, McComas.
Where's Mr. Holmes?
We'll be back in a few minutes. Would you care for a glass of champagne, sir?
Well, thank you. I should like to drink a toast to the pair. I've been in love with Diana for years, you know, but she wouldn't marry me, and well, I suppose I might as well make the best of it. I must say your friend Sherlock Holmes seems like a splendid fellow.
He is indeed, McComas. In fact, I may say... Excuse me, sir. All right, Holmes, I'm coming.
Up here.
What on earth's the matter, Holmes?
Follow me, lock the door behind you. Allow me to introduce you to the demon Asmodeus, Watson. Unfortunately, at the moment, she's in a faint.
Good Lord. It's Diana.
Exactly. Always an impetuous woman, she made the mistake of trying to stab me with that knife. So I bent over to strap up a suitcase. She didn't allow for the wall mirror in which I was watching her.
You mean you suspected her all along?
Of course I did, old fellow. The problem was to find the proof. I first suspected her when I knew that she had been a magician's assistant. The key to the profession of magic is misdirection, and these murders have been a perfect example of misdirection motive.
How do you mean, Holmes?
Well, by creating Asmodeus, thanks to the well-meaning stories of the Reverend Mr. Whalen, whose theological libraries she must have copied the Hebrew signature, she focused the murders on jealousy, concealing the fact that the one person with a perfect motive was herself, the widow who was to inherit.
Oh, why hasn't she been caught before?
Because she was clever, devilishly clever. She left no clues except an indirect one that I had once spotted, that the likeliest person to be able to approach a bridegroom unsuspected and stab him is his bride. And now I wish you'd see if you can revive her, old fellow. When the police get here, I should like Mrs. Holmes to be in full possession of all her faculties.
Well, Holmes, I must say I never expected to be driving back with you to Baker Street on your wedding day. I can't tell you how happy I feel.
Dear old Watson, you really thought that I deserted you, didn't you?
Oh, naturally, I wish you'd told me the truth.
I couldn't tell anyone, not even you. If the faintest shadow of suspicion had entered her mind, I'd never have caught her.
Well, it seems to me you paid a pretty high price, Holmes. You told me you made a will in her favor. Supposing something happens to you before her trial, she'd get the money, you know.
Oh, the will? Oh, no, that was worthless. I told Diana that it was a holographic will and perfectly valid.
Well, what on earth is a holographic will?
A will drawn up in one's own handwriting on a piece of perfectly plain paper. Such a document is quite legal, but I drew mine up on a paper with a letterhead. That made it invalid.
Oh, I see, but the fact remains that you are married, Holmes.
I really fooled you completely, didn't I, Watson? Didn't the name of the clergyman who married us suggest anything to you?
The Reverend Viennese? No, and why not should it?
Well, Viennese was a French painter of some note. He also happens to have been a great uncle of mine and Mycroft's.
You mean that your brother Mycroft was a clergyman?
I mean that Mycroft was disguised as a clergyman. And a very convincing job he did, too. A more satisfactory clergyman than the Reverend Mr. Whalen, no doubt, whose possible complicity may compel him to answer some very awkward questions.
Then you're not married. Well, upon my soul, Holmes, I don't know what to say.
Then I suggest that you say nothing, my dear chap. Let's just sit back quietly, as two good friends can, and brood about the mutability of human affairs.
Well, Doctor, tonight's adventure was really a little extraordinary, to say the least. Holmes sure had a narrow escape.
Doubly narrow, Mr. Foreman, doubly narrow. He not only escaped the jaws of death, but he also escaped the clutches of matrimony. Actually, the story had a happy ending for everybody but Lady Vennering. Jasmine Lafleur.
What about that artist fellow, McComas? How did he take it?
Oh, very well indeed. In fact, in gratitude, he even painted Holmes's portrait. Not exactly a good likeness, though. One of those modern artists who paints his impressions of a person rather than a portrait.
What do you mean?
Well, now, let me see. If he were to paint his impression of you, you'd probably end up by looking like a bottle of Petri wine in a sports jacket.
Go ahead, Doctor. You can tease me all you want to, but I'll still rave about Petri wine. And now, Dr. Watson, what story do you have lined up for us next week?
Well, now, let me see, Mr. Foreman. I'm going to tell you about a strange adventure that began by my taking a wild cab ride through the moonlit streets of London and ended with Holmes and me being trapped in a luxuriously furnished cellar below a furniture warehouse down by the waterfront.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of Shoscombe Old Place. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. This is Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petri family. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell about another exciting adventure he shared with that master detective, his old friend Sherlock Holmes. And now for our weekly visit with the genial Dr. Watson. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Foreman. Come in and settle yourself down.
Thank you. You're looking particularly comfortable tonight, Doctor. Feet up on the sofa and the puppies asleep on your lap.
Yes, my boy. The three of us went for a long walk on the beach this afternoon. And Monty and Winnie had a running battle with the seagulls. In consequence, they've been fast asleep ever since we got home.
Well, I hope you're not too tired, Doctor. I'm counting on a new Sherlock Holmes story, you know.
No. I'm all ready for you, Mr. Foreman. In fact, I was going through my notes on the case just before you arrived.
Well, last week you told us it concerned a strange society who held their meetings in an underground vault of a furniture warehouse.
Yeah, that's right, my boy. Now, down, Winnie. Get down, Monty. No. Excuse me. Down. The story really began one stormy November night in 1887. I was married at the time and living away from Baker Street. On this night in question, my wife had already gone to bed, and I was nodding in front of the fire over one of Clark Russell's fine sea stories. I'd had a very tiring day, I remember. It was about the hour that a man gives his first yawn and glances at the clock, when suddenly my front doorbell jangled discordantly. Our servant Edna had gone up to bed, so I crossed to the window and opened it. It was very dark, but I could just see the outline of a figure standing on my doorstep. It looked like a woman. Suddenly, a cultivated voice called up to me.
Is the doctor in?
Yes, madam. I'm the doctor.
Then please come at once. It's a matter of life and death. I have a carriage waiting.
Gracious me. All right. I'll be down immediately. I closed the window, scribbled a note to my wife, grabbed my coat and hat and my bag, and a few minutes later I stepped out of the front door and closed it behind me. The carriage was standing at the curb, but I couldn't see any trace of the lady who'd called me. The only person in sight was an old and repulsive-looking bigger woman, dressed in rags and tatters. After a moment of bewilderment, I spoke. My good woman, did you see a lady leave here a moment ago?
No, doctor, she didn't leave. She's still waiting for you.
Oh, forgive me, madam, but clothes of yours I thought you were a beggar woman.
There isn't any time to discuss that now. Please get in this carriage.
Oh, but where's the driver?
I'm going to drive. Please get in.
Very well. It's only business. Are you sure that you can handle those horses, madam?
Of course I can.
I wish you'd tell me the way you're driving, man.
Please don't ask me any more questions, Doctor. You'll find out soon enough.
Oh, thank heavens we've finally reached our destination. Must have driven halfway across London. Oh, hello. Must be somewhere down near the river. No dwelling places here. Nothing but enormous warehouses. Why have we stopped here, madam?
Oh, this is where we're going. Please follow me down these steps.
I wish you'd tell me where you're taking me.
We have a club here in the basement. You'll see for yourself in a moment.
It's a very solid-looking door. How do you propose to get past it?
I'll show you.
Lord, it must be a very secret club of yours, madam.
It is, Doctor.
Who knocks?
Number 7.
Give the password.
To the lanterns.
You may enter.
Follow me, Doctor.
Madam, I do wish you'd tell me where you're taking me. This looks like the entrance to an opium den or a thieves' kitchen.
Don't worry, Doctor. You're in no danger. There. Does that look like a thieves' kitchen?
Great Scott, I don't believe my eyes. A luxuriously furnished room. What a strange collection of people. Some look like beggars, others in full evening dress. Amazing.
Number 7. Who is this man?
He's a doctor. I went to fetch him.
I thought I said there were to be no strangers inside.
Now look here, my good man. I've been extremely patient, but my temper's beginning to wear a little thin. Either let me see your patient at once or show me out. My time's valuable and I don't propose to waste it.
I'm sorry, Doctor. Where is Julian?
He's in the back room. And if you know what's good for you, Doctor, whatever you call yourself, you'll forget everything you see in here.
Stop threatening me, sir. I'm not in the least interested in your blasted club. Just take me to the patient.
This is the man we want you to examine, Doctor.
Huh? What happened?
He fell down the stairs leading into the clubroom.
Well, why'd you move him?
We wanted him to be comfortable.
That's the worst thing in the world you could have done. Never move a person with an injured skull.
Is he going to be all right, Doctor?
No, madam, I'm afraid he isn't. His neck's broken. He's dead.
Huh?
Julian, dead.
You sure of that, Doctor?
Of course I'm sure of it, my good man. I'm afraid you need an undertaker, not a doctor.
We must tell the others. All right, quiet, everybody. Quiet. Quiet. Julian is dead.
Julian dead? Oh, this is terrible. Who is this man?
He's a doctor.
Well, better get him out of here at once. We don't want any strangers nosing about.
That's right, though. Shouldn't have brought him here anyway.
Now, just a minute. I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, I haven't the slightest desire to stay here one moment longer. If you'll direct me to the door again, madam, I'll try to find a cab myself in this godforsaken district and go home.
Show him out and give him his money.
Follow me, please.
I'm delighted to.
Do you mind if I don't drive you home, Doctor?
Well, no, I should prefer it. My nerves aren't in the best of shape.
You mustn't be angry with me, Doctor, please.
Leaving again, number 7.
No, but this gentleman is. Will you see if you can find a cab for him?
Right.
To whom shall I send in my bill, madam?
Oh, here's a £5 note. That should cover your time and trouble, shouldn't it?
No. It's far too much, madam.
No, Doctor. It's late at night, and it hasn't been a very pleasant case for you. Please take it.
Oh, it's very kind of you. Very generous indeed. But by the way, how did you happen to come to me in the first place?
I was driving about looking for a doctor, and a policeman directed me to your house.
Oh, I see.
I have found a cab for you.
Thank you, my man. Thank you.
Oh, Doctor, may I come round in the morning for a death certificate.
Of course. You remember my address?
Yes, but I don't know your name.
Watson. Dr. Watson.
Dr. Watson? Not the Dr. Watson who's associated with Sherlock Holmes.
Right, madam, I'm flattered that you know of me.
Good night, Doctor. And please forget about everything you've seen here tonight.
My soul, what an amazing business. Holmes will be interested to hear about this. And that's the way it was, Holmes. One of the most curious adventures I ever had without you.
Very interesting, Watson. You say this underground cellar was luxuriously furnished.
Yes, and the people there were an amazing mixture. Some were in rags and some in evening dress.
Huh, like the nursery rhyme, eh? Some in rags and some in tags and some in velvet gowns.
Exactly. In the feeling that I was taking part in a story out of the Arabian Nights. I must say, though, I was pretty angry at the time. However, after a good night's rest, I feel quite differently this morning. I thought I'd just drop round and tell you all about it.
I'm glad you did, my dear fellow. It would be interesting to see if any repercussions of your strange adventure reach us.
Oh, I doubt it. The woman seemed frightened to death when I mentioned your name.
We shall see. Meanwhile, I'm expecting a client. You're not too busy. Perhaps you can stay.
No, I'd like to very much. Who is it, you know?
This telegram will tell you much more than I can. Arrived an hour ago.
Let's have a look. Be at your lodgings this morning to discuss our problem. Signed AMS. Pretty high-handed message. Be at your lodgings. Oh, please. What do you suppose AMS stands for?
I was just toying with that problem when you arrived.
Would it be the American Medical School?
No, there's no such body. It's the American Medical Association.
Oh, yes.
The imperious tone of the message inclines me to believe that the A stands for amateur.
Very possibly. Amateur Masker Society.
Or the Amateur Murderers. That would be a nice thought, wouldn't it? Is their representative now, no doubt, to save us further guesswork.
Holmes, it looks like the same carriage that I drove in last night. The girl standing on your doorstep, dressed in the height of fashion. Mrs. Hudson's letting her in.
Splendid. It seems that we have not heard the end of your adventure. Go and meet the lady at the top of the stairs, will you, old chap, and save Mrs. Hudson's legs.
Right you are, Holmes. Thank you, Mrs. Hudson, thank you. All right, come in, madam. Want to come in?
Thank you, Dr. Watson. Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
At your service, madam. Won't you sit down?
I'm Lady Dorothy Brownlee.
It's your voice. You're the lady who fetched me last night, dressed up as a beggar woman.
Yes, I am, Dr. Watson. Forgive me for being so mysterious at the time.
Doubtless you have come to consult me regarding last night's unfortunate accident at the Amateur Mendicant Society.
How did you know what the initials stood for, Mr. Holmes?
Well, after hearing Dr. Watson's story of last night's happenings, the connotation seemed obvious. Am I right?
Perfectly. Last night, when Dr. Watson told us Julian was dead, we thought it was an accident.
And now you think it is murder, eh? Lady Bromley, if you expect my help, there must be no more mystery. Just what is this Amateur Mendicant Society?
Well, I'm afraid it'll be a little hard for you to understand our motives. We're a group of people, rather wealthy people, I suppose, who find pleasure in deliberately leading a seamy life disguised as beggars. We use the basement that you were in last night, Doctor, as our headquarters. We keep our beggars there and change out of them before we go home.
Oh, what a fantastic idea.
What a futile, worthless way of spending your leisure time, Lady Bromley.
I suppose it must seem so, Mr. Holmes. But we're curious to learn how the other half lives. And of course, there's a certain thrill in rubbing shoulders with the police. At least we do some good.
Indeed. I should be interested to learn how.
All the money we make as beggars we give to charity.
Oh, do you really? And you feel that this gesture on your part absolves you from any responsibility to the real beggars whose livelihood you're impairing?
I hadn't thought of it just like that.
No.
Then I suppose you won't want to help us.
Oh, that's quite another matter, madam. As a professional detective, I cannot afford to be a moralist. Yes, I will investigate this case for you, though I warn you my fee will be an extremely high one.
Money isn't important, Mr. Holmes, as long as we can solve Julian's death without bringing the police into the case.
Lady Brownlee, who is the dead man? The man you refer to as Julian?
Julian Trevor, the poet. He was the one who started our society.
Yes, I think I've read some of his work. Decadent. Distinctly decadent.
Well, what makes you think that he was murdered, Lady Brownlee?
Well, after you left last night, Dr. Watson, there was a terrible scene. You remember Sidney Holt?
Oh, was he the big fellow who was so unpleasant to him?
Yes, that's the one.
Oh, do I remember him?
He said that he saw Lord Cecil deliberately trip Julian as he came to the head of the staircase.
Oh, Lord Cecil being...
Lord Cecil Dyrenforth, son of the Earl of Meersham.
Oh, yes.
There was a bitter argument. Cecil accused Sidney of doing the same thing. Then they had a dreadful fight. It ended up with Cecil threatening to go to the police. So that's when we decided to send a telegram to you, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, yes, I see. So the proof of murder depends on such flimsy evidence as to whether the dead man fell or, well, shall we say, was pushed?
What it seems like.
Mr. Holmes, even though you don't approve, please help us, won't you?
Yes, Lady Brownlee, I will.
Then you come back with me now to our headquarters?
I shall join you within the hour. In the meantime, my old friend Dr. Watson can go with you.
But Holmes, what can I do without you?
You know my methods, old chap. Act accordingly.
Oh?
Very well, Mr. Holmes. But you promise you'll be there.
I promise you that I will be there, madam.
Thank you so much, Mr. Holmes. We'll be expecting you. Come on, Doctor.
Well, I'll just get my hat and coat. Holmes, what are you up to?
Go with her and ask no more questions. I shall join you within the hour.
Holmes, there's a glint in your eye. I don't think you believe the story.
Of course I don't, Watson.
Well, then what?
Then go with her, old fellow, and keep your wits about you. The game's afoot.
And now back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. The Amateur Mendicant Society, a group of wealthy eccentrics who pose as beggars, have come to Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson with a problem. One of their members has apparently been murdered, and the famous pair have been asked to investigate the killing. As we rejoin our story, Dr. Watson, still awaiting the arrival of the great detective, is cross-questioning three of the members at the headquarters of this unusual society.
But I don't find your stories very convincing.
Oh, don't you now? Well, then suppose you stop asking questions until Sherlock Holmes gets here. He's the man we've engaged to settle this business, not you. We're paying for his services, not those of his assistant.
Mr. Holmes asked me to conduct this preliminary investigation, my good man. I'm perfectly familiar with his methods, so keep a civil tongue in your head if you want us to continue with this case.
Well, I'm not answering any more questions till he gets here.
Insufferable fellow. Lord Cecil, you say that you saw Holt deliberately trip the dead man as he came down the stairs last night.
Yes, I did.
Well, where were you standing, sir?
At the head of the staircase. Holt was beside me, and as Julian came by, he deliberately...
Excuse me, number 11, excuse me.
What is it?
There is a strange man just come in. He is dressed as you when you work, but I do not remember to have seen him here before. He speaks very rough.
Did he give the correct signal?
Yes, and the password.
He must be a new member.
I suppose we better see him. Bring him in. Oh, bad time for him to come here. Confound it.
This way, please.
Tommy, what a nice place you got here. Yeah, what a nice place. Certainly do yourselves proud, don't you?
Who are you, and how did you get in here?
I'll give you a signal and the password just like Julian told me to.
Are you a friend of Julian?
Of course I am. You coming to meet him here today?
Who are you really?
Are we all friends here?
Yes, you can talk freely.
And permit me to introduce myself. I am Don Luis Jose Fernando de las Torres at your service.
Why? Why do you want to join us?
When Julian told me about it, it tickled my, my funny bone. It is a so charming idea to see those of mendicancy.
I suppose he's all right.
Of course I'm all right. Now, where is Julian, please? He will vouch for me.
He's in the other room. He had an accident.
An accident? Not a bad one, I hope?
A very bad one. Dr. Watson, you better take him in there and break the news to him.
Very well. Follow me, sir.
This is terrible. Please, tell me what happened, Doctor.
I'm afraid you must prepare yourself for a shock, sir. Your friend is dead. His neck was broken last night in some brawl.
Yes, except that I do believe it was an accident, Watson.
Holmes!
Quiet, old chap, quiet.
But not quietly enough, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Come on, come back to the others and let all take a look at you. Come on, get moving, both of you. This isn't a pop gun in my hands.
Sorry, Holmes, I gave the whole thing away.
That's all right, old chap.
Oh, Cecil, Dorothy, come here. I want you to take a look at the great Sherlock Holmes. Walked into our trap just like any stupid policeman. No, I had to dress up to do it, though, Mr. Holmes. We were waiting for you here anyway, you know.
Oh, I was well aware of that, Mr. Holt. You see, I knew I was walking into a trap.
How did you know that, Mr. Holmes?
Lady Brownlee, the story you brought to us today was so obviously a false one. Just as there is no amateur mendicant society.
Who are they, Holmes?
Go ahead, Mr. Holmes. Tell him. Let's see how much you really do know.
Yes, go ahead.
Why should I tell you what you already know?
Go on, talk if you know what's good for you.
Oh, you're so persuasive, aren't you, Mr. Holt? Very well. Undoubtedly, Julian Trevor's death last night was an accident. You fetched a doctor, Lady Brownlee, a very natural move, and later discovered that the doctor in question was the old friend of Sherlock Holmes. You were all afraid that I would become interested in your unusual society, and so you invented that very thin story about the accident being a murder. You wanted to lure me here so that I could be disposed of, and you could all continue your nefarious works without hindrance.
Well, now aren't we clever? What is our nefarious work, may I ask?
Your password gave me a clue to the lanterns. Prior to the French revolutionists. They strung the aristocrats up on the lampposts. Then again, the combination of curious costumes and a luxurious establishment in a low-class area posed another question. What political belief provides a common meeting ground for misguided aristocrats and dangerous commoners?
And how did you answer that question?
Oh, very simple, my dear sir. One word. Nihilism. Its doctrine of assassination and overthrow of government would find every chance of being put into practice by all of you at the forthcoming Jubilee celebrations to be held here in London. And also would account for your beggar's clothes. A beggar would have greater freedom of movement in a crowd than an ordinary person.
You're a clever man, Mr. Holmes. Too bad you'll have to die. I'll get the rope.
What are you going to do with him?
Do? Give him a first-hand taste of nihilism, of course. They can't live. They know too much.
You can't possibly do this, you know. The police will track us here.
By the time the police get here, you and your friend Holmes will be blown to kingdom come.
Here's the rope, Sidney.
Oh, right. Hands together, Mr. Holmes. That's it.
Ah! Oh, mind that bandaged wrist of mine, will you? It's confoundedly sore.
Oh, isn't that a shame now? Is this any better? Ooh. Tie up the doctor, Cecil, while I bind Holmes's legs.
With pleasure.
I can't go through with this.
What do you mean, Dorothy? You can't go through with it.
I just can't stand by and see two innocent men murdered.
Don't be a fool, Dorothy. We can't let them live. They know too much.
I don't care. If you go on with this, I'm going out for the police.
You fool. Tie her up as well, Cecil.
Leave me alone.
Sit down there beside him. Go on.
You're a devil.
Oh, shut up. Now, Mr. Holmes, I'm going to fetch a little invention. A little invention I'm sure you'll be interested in.
Mr. Holmes, it's a pity you and your friend didn't learn to mind your own business.
I'm afraid it's too late to teach an old dog new tricks.
It's too late now, at any rate. Quite comfortable, Dr. Watson?
Don't you speak to me, sir. You're a filthy traitor to your country.
Rubbish.
Here we are. Example of Mikhail Petrov's mechanical genius. This bomb will blow the entire building sky high, and the three of you with it. Now, I wind the time clock so, and we'll set the fuse to go off in 5 minutes. It'll give us plenty of time to get away. So.
Come on, Sidney, let's get out of here.
Right. Charming picture. Three of you bound hand and foot sitting beside each other on the sofa. Well, ta-da, Dorothy. Think of our cause during the 5 minutes. And as for you, Mr. Holmes, and your friend, good riddance to bad rubbish.
Well, Holmes, this looks like the end.
Afraid so, old chap.
I blame myself. If I hadn't been so infernally noisy when I recognized you, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Wasn't your fault, old fellow. I think they suspected me anyway.
Well, I must say it seemed to me that you told them a great deal more than was necessary about your suspicions. Surely you could pretended ignorance.
Oh, I suppose I could have done.
I can't die yet. I'm not ready to
Courage,
die.
Lady Brownlee, courage. And by the way, was I right in assuming that your associates are nihilists?
Of course they are. They're planning to assassinate the Prime Minister during the Jubilee celebration.
Prime Minister, great heavens, Holmes, we've got to get free.
Assuming some miracle happened, we did get free and your former associates were arraigned in court. Would you testify against them?
Oh, of course I would. But what chance is there of that? That devilish carbide doesn't accept
If it bothers you that much, Lady Brownlee, I'll stop it for you.
Holmes, your hands are free.
Of course they are, my dear fellow. bandaged wrist I mentioned just now concealed a razor-edged blade. I cut through the ropes almost before our friends had left the room.
Then why did you keep us in the suspense, Mr. Holmes?
I wanted to be quite sure that you'd testify in the forthcoming trial, madam. There we are. That renders the bar harmless. Ah! And that means that the police have sprung the trap that I set for your associates, Lady Brownlee. It's lucky for you that you had a change of heart and prevented you from leaving us.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, how could I ever thank you?
Holmes, you had the place surrounded with police when you came in here.
Of course I did, my dear fellow. Here, you can do your ropes.
No wonder you were so calm. No wonder you told them so much. You wanted them to show their hands.
Precisely, old fellow. And they obliged me most satisfactorily. They attempted our triple murder. They are self-confessed anarchists. And with the evidence of Lady Brownlee, I'm sure that we can put them where they all belong. Considering it barely noon, I think you'll agree, Watson, that is a very comprehensive morning's work.
Doctor, tell the truth. Were you scared waiting for that time bomb to go off?
Scared, my boy? I was so scared that to this day I can't stand being in the same room with a loud ticking clock. Each tick of the clock seems to speak to me. Seems to say, tick-tock, this is the end. Tick-tock, this is the end. The clock ever speak to you like that?
Well, yes, Doctor. How did you know?
Well, what's the clock say to you?
Tick-tock. Petri took time to bring you good wine. Petri took time to bring you good wine.
Gracious me, Mr. Foreman.
You listen to your clock and I'll listen to mine. Gosh, Doctor, can I help it if I like to hear about Petri wine? And now, Dr. Watson, what adventure are you planning to tell us next week?
Well, next week, Mr. Foreman, I'm going to tell you a story of old Vienna. The Vienna of sparkling lights, beautiful women, and lilting music. And of an extraordinary murder that takes place to the accompaniment of a Mozart sonata.
Boy, that sounds like a thriller. I'll see you for sure next week.
Just a minute. Before I go, Mr. Foreman, I want to urge every registered nurse listening in to get all the facts about the Army Nurse Corps. The Army needs you, nurses, needs you desperately. They'll make you an officer at once and give you every chance to further your post-war careers. So if you're a registered nurse under 45, call at your local Red Cross chapter and get all the details. Or wire collect to the Surgeon General, U.S. Army, Washington, D.C. And if you can't qualify for the Nurses Corps, see if you can't get into essential civilian nursing so that you can release a nurse who does qualify. But do something about it first thing tomorrow. Won't you?
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The 5 Orange Pips. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. This is Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petri family. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell about another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective Sherlock Holmes. And now for our weekly visit with the good Dr. Watson. Let's see if he's waiting for us.
Good evening, Mr. Foreman.
Oh, good evening, Doctor. Playing the phonograph, I see.
Yes, my boy, and that particular melody has very potent memories for me. Here, I'll turn the thing on. You haven't come here to listen to a Mozart sonata. You want a story, don't you, young fellow, my lad?
That's right, Doctor.
Well, let's sit down. All
right.
That's better. Now I'll tell you what.
Oh, thank you, Doctor.
Began in Vienna in 1889, many years before the insane house painter named Schicklgruber had converted that gay city into a place of fear and oppression.
And what were you and Sherlock Holmes doing there, Doctor? Just taking a trip?
Mr. Foreman, in those early days of our association, we didn't have the time or the money for just taking trips. No. We were in Vienna because Holmes had been engaged in certain highly important investigations. We were staying in a charming little pension inhabited by students and musicians. And on the night the story began, we'd finished dinner and had returned to our room. I was busy making some notes on the investigation we'd just concluded, and Holmes was scraping away at his beloved violin.
Confound it. What's wrong? Why can't I get it?
Oh, it sounds very pretty to me.
Pretty, really, old chap. I'm an amateur. And a heavy-fingered one at that. Listen to this. Oh, sounds like a fiddler at an Irish wake.
Oh, take it easy, Holmes. Take it easy. There's no need to fling the violin down like that.
What's an old chap? Why, with all your other excellent qualities, are you not a pianist?
What's the piano got to do with it?
In this case, everything. There's a piano in this room, and if you could play it, the Mozart sonata I'm struggling with might have some meaning. Come in. Oh, good evening, Fräulein. Wish to see me?
You are Herr Sherlock Holmes.
That is my name.
Then yeah, I wish to see you. I'm Lea Uhlenstein. I live here in this pension.
How do you do? This is my friend, Dr. Watson.
How do you do, Herr Doctor?
I'm glad to meet you, my dear lady.
Fräulein Uhlenstein, may I pay my tribute to the brilliance of your piano playing? You have the exact precision of phrasing that Mozart demands.
How do you know of me?
Both Dr. Watson and I were present at the command performance you gave at the Imperial Court a fortnight ago.
Hey, Julius, I knew I'd seen you somewhere before. My friend was just expressing the need of a pianist as you walked in, young lady. Perhaps the
I'm
two
sorry.
of you...
I do not play with amateurs.
Amateurs? Well, really?
I do not mean to be rude. It's just that my life is dedicated to my professional career.
I quite understand, Fräulein. And now please tell me, what can I do to help you? I must presume you have come to see me in my professional capacity.
Yeah, well, that is correct, Herr Holmes. Though I realize to a great detective like you, my problem must seem quite trivial. I'm being blackmailed by a man in this pension. He is Sándor Arpady, a Hungarian painter who lives in the studio upstairs.
Sándor Arpady. Yes, I think I've heard of him.
Since 2 months now, ever since he know my secret, he's come to me for money, and today he tell me he must have 250 gulden, or he will go to the police. I have not that much money. Herr Holmes, please to tell me what I shall do.
Just what hold does he have over you?
My brother, Karl, he got into some trouble here, and the police were looking for him, but he ran away to München, as you say, Munich, and Sándor Arpady knew of this. He was a friend of mine, so I thought. When this trouble come on my brother, I turned to Sándor for help. He smuggled Karl out of the country, and he turned on me for blackmail. He's a bad man. I wish he was dead.
Most blackmailers are cowards at heart. I think Dr. Watson and I will call on the gentleman. By the way, does he have any written evidence of your brother's crime?
Yeah, he has his address in Munich. I show Sándor a letter from him when he first go there, and he keep the letter, will not give it back to me.
And if he gave the police your brother's address, they'd arrest him, eh?
They would, of course.
Yes, of course they would.
Herr Holmes, will you please to tell me what I should do? I cannot go on this way. My music
now,
is
Fräulein,
suffering.
calm yourself. I shall be most happy to help you, and if you will lead the way, we'll see how persuasive we can be with Sándor Arpady.
That is the studio, Herr Holmes, at the end of the corridor.
I see. Now, remember, young lady, you'd better let me do most of the talking.
He must be out.
That is possible.
Locked. I think, bearing in mind our party's profession, we'll take the liberty of opening his door.
That doesn't look a very complicated lock to me.
Oh, I think this skeleton key will do the trick.
It's very dangerous, Herr Holmes, if Sándor finds you doing...
No. Don't worry about that, Fräulein. We're perfectly capable of taking care of ourselves.
There we are. Close the door behind you, will you, Watson?
Can't see a thing. I'll strike a match.
Oh, God in him.
Quick, Scott, look at him. Slumped over his desk.
Light the gas, will you, Watson?
Right you are, Holmes. There.
Judging from his appearance, Fräulein Ullenstein, I think Sandor Party had other enemies besides yourself. Less scrupulous enemies.
He's been strangled. Look at the finger marks on his throat.
Is he?
Yes. His body is still warm, though. I'm afraid he's dead.
I am glad. He was a bad man. Deserved to die.
Watson, do you notice that the fingers of the killer have broken the skin and drawn blood?
Yes, so they have.
Should we not communicate with the police?
Before we do that, Fräulein, we must see if we can find your brother's letter. Help me move the body, will you, Watson? Lying across an open dispatch box that might contain the document in question.
Right, Joe.
Come on, my fellow. That's it. For a painter, the late Mr. Arpadi was an unusually methodical man. Everything filed here in alphabetical order. Here we are. You, Fräulein Leah Ullenstein. And the letter has the Munich postmark. I think this must be the document in question. Will you examine it, please, Fräulein?
Yeah, this is the letter. Herr Holmes, how can I thank you?
There's very little to thank me for. If the blackmailer were still alive, I fear it wouldn't have been so simple a matter. I wonder what other treasures this box contains. Hello? Hello?
What is it, Holmes?
Interesting. Extremely interesting. Look at this, old fellow.
Good Lord. Information on the case that we've just been working on.
Exactly, and from the names attached to the document, I think we may assume that the dead man did not confine his blackmailing to struggling young pianists. He was after big game, too.
Yes, we'd better be careful, Holmes. I don't think that we should go for the police just yet.
No. We'll start by having a little talk with the other residents of this pension. Fräulein, who lives in the room adjoining this one?
I too, Herr Holmes.
And the room across the landing?
Lai Tong-fo, the great Chinese actor, he's performing here in Vienna.
I see. Then I think we'll start by calling on him. Return to your room, Fräulein, and we will let you know later what we've found. In the meantime, say nothing to anyone of what has happened.
I will do everything you tell me, Herr Holmes, and please, once again, please let me thank you for what you've done for me.
You know, Holmes, I'm not sure that girl didn't strangle Arpadi herself. Pianist would have unusual strength in her fingers, and we know that she had the motive. And look how unnaturally calm she was when she realized the man was dead.
I disagree with you, old fellow.
Huh?
I think what you refer to as unnatural calmness is really the cold detachment of the true artist.
Well, I have a feeling that we should keep an eye on her, just the same.
We will, Watson, we will. And now I suggest we pay a visit across the landing to the distinguished Chinese actor, Mr. Ling Tu Fo.
Yes, please. You wish to see me?
If you could spare us a moment, sir.
But of course, gentlemen. Please to come in.
My name is Sherlock Holmes. This is my colleague, Dr. Watson.
How do you do, sir? How do you do?
I am greatly flattered to meet you. You are not here to see me in your professional capacity, I hope, Mr. Holmes?
Oh, no, not exactly. I just wanted to ask you a few questions.
Please, to ask me anything.
Do you know Sandor Arpadi, the painter who lives across the hall?
I know him by sight. We nod to each other on the stairs, nothing more.
I see. Have you been in your room most of the evening, may I ask?
But yes, I have been sitting here quietly for the past few hours, reading over the Annex of Confucius.
No, Confucius. May I ask, sir, whether you heard any unusual noises this evening? Sounds of a struggle or a cry from the direction of Sandor Arpadi's room, for instance?
I do not think so. Wait, yes. I think I did hear laced voices in there, and the sound of a cry.
About how long ago was this?
Oh, an hour ago, perhaps more. Is anything wrong? Has trouble come to Sandor?
Sandor? I thought you said you had only a nodding acquaintance with the gentleman.
He is a well-known artist. It is only natural I should call him by his first name, Mr. Holmes, even though I do not know him. Has something happened to him?
I'm afraid so, but I can't tell you any more about it at the moment. Thank you for your cooperation. We shall see you again, no doubt. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. That fellow wasn't telling us the truth, you know, Holmes. He seemed very shifty to me. Well, where are we going now?
Downstairs to the porter's desk. There's only one entrance to this house, you'll remember. The porter may be able to tell us of Any unusual comings and goings in the last hour or two. Come on, old chap, don't dawdle. There's a great deal of work ahead of us.
Ja, Herr Holmes, what can I do for you?
How long have you been on duty tonight?
Since 5 o'clock.
Did you notice what people have come in or gone out since then?
No one has gone out.
Ah, splendid. And who came in?
Fräulein Ullenstein came in just after 6,
yes.
and Herr Apperdy, the painter, came in a few minutes later. That is all.
Ah. Who lives in the other ground floor apartments besides Dr. Watson and myself?
There are only 2 other apartments. In the one to the right of the corridor lives Madame Janssen. She's a Swedish lady, a sculptor.
And in the other?
Signora Violetti, the Italian opera singer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm much obliged to you.
I'm happy to be of service, Herr Holmes.
Where are we off to now? Back to our room?
Oh, we'll call on Madame Violetti if she's at home.
It sounds as if she's very much at home.
Signor Sherlock Holmes, and he's a friend have come to see me. Bravo! Bravissimo! I have so much wish to make your acquaintance. Sit down.
No, I'm afraid we can only stay for a moment, madam. My friend wanted to ask you a few questions.
Yes, Signora. I just wanted to know...
I know your questions. Oh. You play the violin. I have heard you.
Yes.
You want to know whether the great Valeria will allow you to accompany her in a magnificent soprano aria allo so from Mozart's Il Flauto Magico. Violetti's answer to your question is si.
Yes, madam. Forgive me, Signora, but if you don't mind. But that was not one of my questions.
It was not? But I will sing it with just the same.
You flatter me, but at the moment there are other things on my mind. Signora Violetti, do you know Chandora Paddy?
By his side. That is all. He make eyes at me, but I no pay attention. I do not like Hungarians.
You haven't seen him this evening?
No. I've been alone, reviewing the score at La Traviata.
Yes.
I am to sing it next week here in Vienna. I hope you'll both be present. It would be a great treat for you.
I'm sure it would be, Signora. Now, if you'll excuse us.
Oh, it is sad you must go so soon. But come and see me again, and I will sing for you both before you leave Vienna.
Great Scott, what a ghastly woman. She's not your murderess, I'm sure. And now I suppose we'll have to question this sculptress woman. And then we'll talk to everyone in the house.
No, I think before we visit her, we'll examine the dead man's room a little more closely. That black tin dispatch box may hold the key to this mystery.
Idiot! Numbskull! Why didn't I go through these papers thoroughly at first?
They certainly tell an interesting story. Appardi had obviously been blackmailing Madame Janssen, the sculptor.
Yes, and also our friend, the Chinese actor, Lai Tung-fo.
Then Lai Tung-fo was lying when he said that he didn't know Appardi.
Obviously.
By George, 3 of the 4 people living in this house in his power.
Hello.
What's the matter? What have you found?
Footprints in the cigar ash on the carpet. Prints of a small foot. Leading us to this closet.
Somebody must have been hiding in there.
Yes, possibly. Uh-huh. Take a look at these, Watson.
Strands of hair. Long black hair. Where were they?
On a hook in the cupboard. Someone bracing themselves back so as to be out of sight could easily leave such evidence.
I've got it, Holmes. I've got it. The long black hair, the long nails that caused the peculiar marks upon his throat, and the small footprint. It was a woman.
But which one? Fräulein Ullenstein and Signora Violetti both have blonde hair, remember?
And it must be that sculptress woman.
Not necessarily. Who else, not a woman, might have small feet, long nails, and long black hair?
By Jove, the Chinese actress.
Precisely. Come on.
I hope he's still there.
Come on, sir. Come on. Let's go in.
Holmes, Look at him. He's praying. His head's in his hand.
No, my dear fellow, I'm afraid prayers can do him no good now. He's been strangled. Strangled with his own cue.
And now back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. The famous pair are staying in Vienna, where they've become involved in the mysterious strangling of a notorious blackmailer. As we rejoin our story, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are cross-questioning another of the suspects, a Swedish sculptress by the name of Madame Janssen.
What do you want with me? Why have you come in here?
Well, we just wanted to ask you a few questions, madam.
To admire your figurines, may I ask if you always work in clay?
Yeah, but what's that to you? Do you wish to buy some of my sculpture?
No, but I assure you the question was pertinent.
Tell me who you are and stop wasting my time.
My friend is a private detective, madam.
A detective? Who sent you here?
No one sent me here. I'm conducting an investigation of the murder of Shandor Paddy.
Shandor dead?
Mm-hmm.
Good. I'm glad.
Yes, madam, but we happen to know that you had a motive for killing him. He'd been blackmailing you.
Get out of here. What right have you to come here and question me?
No. Look here, madam. If you know what's good for you, you will answer our question.
And if you know what's good for you, you'll get out of here, both of you.
Come along, Watson.
But, Holmes, you can't possibly...
Forgive me, madam, for our intrusion. We meant no rudeness.
You have been rude. Intolerably rude. Go away.
Whatever made you back down like that, Holmes? Obviously, she's the killer.
Rubbish.
But her hair was jet black.
Yes, but it was short hair. And didn't you notice the size of her feet anyway? She works in clay. If it had been marble, I might have suspected her.
Upon my soul, Holmes, I wish you'd tell me what you're driving at.
The answer to these killings now, Watson. But I'll have to prove it. I'm afraid I must work without you, old chap. Do you mind waiting for me in our room? No. Wait a minute. That may be dangerous. Wait for me in Signora Violetti's room, if you don't mind. I'll join you there as soon as my work is done. Pretend that you have returned because you were so enchanted with her voice.
Oh, great Scott, Holmes, you can't ask me to be alone with that dreadful woman.
Please do as I say, Watson, and don't question me. There isn't a moment to be lost.
You know that aria, my dear doctor.
No, madam, I'm afraid I don't.
You've not heard about great Giuseppe Verdi?
Well, yes, I heard him, of course, but I can't identify his work.
That was from a Rigoletto, you silly man.
Rigoletto?
Come, tell me your favorite composer. I will sing a song of his just for you. I will turn the gas light down.
No. Turn the gas light down.
That will be so much more romantic. Now, who is your favorite composer?
I don't know that I have any favorite. What's his name? Wagner's very fine, you know.
Wagner is a heavy like most German composers. But the Violatti can master him.
Oh, Lord, here she goes again.
Come in. I cannot see who it is. Come into the light.
It is I.
Great heavens, the Chinese actor.
I am sorry to make commotion, but as we say in my country, those who return from grave speak with double knowledge.
Oh, you devil! You devil! I kill you once! I kill you once! I kill you again!
Thank you for the confession, Senora Violetti. You can testify to it, Watson.
Holmes!
No, you don't, Senora. Your nails are too sharp for my liking.
I'll kill you to both of you! I'll kill you!
Watson, catch her.
She's fainted, Holmes.
Fainted, eh? What an undramatic exit for a most dramatic lady.
Well, Holmes, now that you've turned Signora Violetti over to the police, perhaps you'd tell me what made you certain that she was the murderess.
It was obvious from the beginning that Parry was strangled by someone with long fingernails. When Lai Tung Fo was killed, it ruled him out. Then who was the woman with a motive and long nails?
First of all, no.
Elementary, my dear fellow. Was the woman Fräulein Ullenstein? No. Being a concert pianist, her nails were naturally short. The sculptress who worked in clay? Again, no. That would make it impossible for her to mold her delicate figurines. Therefore, Signora Violetti, by the process of elimination, was the only woman with long nails.
But why did she strangle the Chinese actor, too?
Undoubtedly, he witnessed the first killing. The long black hairs in the closet were from his cue. I presume that later he threatened Signora Violetti, and so he himself was strangled.
I still don't understand why she strangled our Pardi in the first place.
Mr. Watson, I think you'll find that he's been blackmailing her, too. Remember, he had documents incriminating everyone in the house except her. I think we may assume she killed him and then removed her own papers from the dispatch box. But I'd no proof, and so, well, I had to frighten her into confession.
So that's why you disguised yourself as Lai Tung Fu.
Yes, I borrowed the robes from his room. It was lucky that the lights were low as I entered. Yes. And it's also fortunate that to the average European, all Chinese look alike. Come in. Ah, Fräulein Ullenstein. We're coming in to see you in a few minutes.
I've been waiting so anxiously. Is everything all right?
Well, from your point of view, my dear young lady, yes.
There's nothing more for you to worry about.
Oh, I would like to repay you, Herr Holmes.
I've done very little for you, but if you really feel that you owe me something...
Yeah?
Well, perhaps just this once you wouldn't mind accompanying an amateur?
It would be a pleasure. What is it you wish me to play?
A Mozart sonata.
But of course. The rondo from the E-flat, I suppose.
That's splendid. Please, Fräulein.
You like Mozart, Herr Doctor?
Oh, very much, young lady, very much. In fact, I might say he is my favorite composer. Charming. Perfectly charming. I only wish that all our adventures could end so melodiously.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, A Case of Identity. Mr. Rathbone appears for the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce for the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. This is Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petrie family. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petrie Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petrie family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us about another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And now let's drop in on our good friend, Dr. Watson. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Foreman.
Where are the puppies tonight?
Well, I found them playing with a dead seagull, so they've been sent up to bed in disgrace.
Well, you certainly look comfortable yourself, Doctor. What's that small blue book you're reading, the latest bestseller?
No, indeed not. This book was never a bestseller, my boy. It's entitled Practical Handbook of Bee Culture, with some observations on the segregation of the queen.
Quite a catchy title. Who's the author?
A fellow by the name of Sherlock Holmes. He was engaged in writing it when the adventure I'm going to tell you about took place.
Well, you told us last week, Doctor, that a pair of canaries played an important part in the story.
That's quite right, Mr. Foreman. It was in the summer of 1908, I remember, and I had persuaded Holmes to leave his Sussex bee farm for a few weeks and to join me in a holiday at the little fishing village of Kingsgate in Kent. We were staying at a charming little inn called the Fisherman's Arms, and for the first few days our holiday was a delightful one. And then...
And then, I suppose, Doctor, strange things began to happen.
They did indeed, Mr. Foreman, they did indeed. Very strange things. One afternoon, we just finished a late tea, I remember, and were sitting outside on the lawn sunning ourselves and enjoying our pipes. Holmes lay back with his long, thin fingers clasped behind his head, gazing thoughtfully at the multicolored fishing boats bobbing at anchor in the harbor. After a moment or two, he spoke to me.
Watson, you're really a splendid companion. I can't think of anyone else who would let me smoke my pipe in silence for half an hour without asking me what I'm thinking about.
That's not very surprising, Holmes, after all the years that we've been together.
Well, nevertheless, the gift is a rare one, old chap, and I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, old fellow. By the way, since the half hour's up, what have you been thinking about?
The lack of enterprise of a modern criminal. Audacity and romance seem to have passed forever from the criminal world. Read this note I received this morning, old fellow. See for yourself how low I have sunk.
All right, have a look. Mr. Holmes, I am staying in the same inn as yourself, and as I have had a very frightening experience this week, I thought perhaps you would help me. Please do. It's signed Mary Victor.
An exciting document, isn't it? Written on lavender notepaper, reeking of perfume, and the handwriting is obviously that of an adolescent girl.
You haven't bothered to answer it, of course.
Oh, yes, I have. I sent a message back by our good landlord that I would be glad to see her.
Why, Holmes? You came down here to complete your handbook on bee farming.
Oh. Confound it. Those two wretched canaries are getting their sunbath on the windowsill above us.
Oh, I think it's rather jolly to hear those fellows chirping away up there.
Well, I find the sound most distracting. Let's go inside.
You know, Holmes, those birds are owned by a charming couple, Mr. and Mrs. Wainwright. I was chatting with them on the stairs this morning.
I'm afraid their charm will escape me as long as their pets continue to tweet in that irritating manner. You've spoken of the peace and quiet of the country inn, Watson, and yet I find that... Come in. Ah, Miss Mary Victor, I presume.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Please come in and close the door, won't you? Thank you. This is my old friend, Dr. Watson. You may speak quite freely in front of him.
How do you do, Miss Victor?
How do you do, Doctor?
Now, sit down, young lady, and tell me what's troubling you.
Mr. Holmes, I came down here from London to get away from someone, but I've been followed. I've been afraid to leave the inn. Until last night I felt I couldn't stand being cooped up any longer. So I went for a walk on the seashore. Someone followed me, Mr. Holmes. I ran back here as fast as I could, but now he knows where I live, and I'm frightened. Please help me.
My dear Miss Victor, I'm afraid you must be much more specific before I can help you. Who has followed you down here, and why are you afraid of him?
I'll tell you the whole story. It'll sound strange to you, but I swear it's... Oh, there he is again, down by the gate. I'm going to my room.
Now. Don't you be frightened, Miss Victor. I'm sure we'll be... Oh, Basil. Extraordinary thing.
I don't see anyone outside who might frighten her. There are 2 or 3 fishermen loitering about. Wait a minute. Here's a young fellow walking up the path. Come on, Watson. Out through the French windows again.
Oh, gracious me. Here we go again.
I think we'll take the liberty of accosting him. Excuse me, sir.
Yes?
Are you looking for Miss Mary Victor?
Is she young and pretty?
Yes, sir. She is. Extremely so.
Then I'm looking for her. Where can I find her?
I can see you're being facetious, sir.
Well, there's no harm in that, is there? By the way, who are you gentlemen, may I ask?
My name is Holmes, and this is my friend Dr. Watson.
I'm Basil Carter. You're not Sherlock Holmes, are you?
That is my name.
I thought you seemed familiar. I know your brother, Mycroft.
Oh, indeed. Then I presume you're connected with the Foreign Office.
Yes, I'm in the consular service.
Are you staying at the inn, young man?
For a few days. It's funny that I should run into the great Sherlock Holmes.
May I ask?
I was planning a murder.
Oh, really?
But with you gentlemen here, I see that I shall have to be very discreet.
Who is your intended victim, may I inquire?
There are 2 of them. The 2 canaries in the room next to mine.
Oh, canaries. For a moment I thought that you were really serious.
But I am serious. The wretched creatures have been driving me mad.
Yes, I quite sympathize with you, sir. I've been thinking of committing a slight case of mayhem on them myself.
We can take one apiece, Mr. Holmes. Well, I'm glad to have met you both. I'll probably see you again.
Goodbye.
Well, goodbye, sir, goodbye. I don't like that fellow, Holmes. If you ask me, he's the man who's been frightening the poor girl that came to us. He had a peculiar look on his face when you asked me if he was looking for Mary Victor.
Well, there's only one person who can settle the question, and that's the young lady herself. Come on, old fellow. Let's go back indoors.
Shh. Here comes Wainwright, the owner of the Canaries. Good evening, Mr. Wainwright.
Good evening, gentlemen.
This is my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
I'm honored to meet you, sir.
How do you do, Mr. Wainwright?
Beautiful evening, isn't it? I just took a stroll down to the store to get some more birdseed. By the way, Mr. Holmes, I hope our canaries don't bother you. Little fellows are such a comfort to my wife and me.
Oh, no, not at all, sir. I find their chirruping very soothing.
Oh, I'm so glad. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, sir.
Good night, Mr. Wilson.
Not Wilson, Mr. Holmes. Wainwright.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. I thought you said Wilson.
Good night.
Well, not like you to mix up names, Holmes.
I didn't mix them up, old fellow. I never forget a face. Mr. Wainwright is in reality Wilson, the notorious Canary trainer, whom I had the pleasure of sending to prison for a 7-year stretch in '95. Some years later, he made one of the most spectacular escapes from prison in the history of crime, and has since managed to evade all efforts to recapture him.
Great Scott, he seems such a sweet old fellow.
Well, possibly he's reformed, but I doubt it. Our stage is set for an intriguing problem, old chap, and our cast is an interesting one. A frightened young girl, a diplomat of uncertain integrity, and a noted criminal. Watson, I have a feeling that once again the game's afoot.
Holmes, why are we strolling along the pier instead of staying at the inn? I thought you said that you were expecting trouble.
I am, old chap, and I'm sure it'll find us out.
You know, Holmes, I'm still completely mystified by the behavior of that girl, Mary Victor. I knocked at her door last evening, again this morning. I couldn't get any answer.
And the landlord told me that she was not seen at dinner last night, nor at breakfast this morning, and yet her room has not been vacated. Curious.
Hello, there's the village constable, sunning himself at the end of the pier.
Yeah. Good morning, Sergeant Blake.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. How are you, gentlemen?
Yes, thank you, Sergeant, and very appreciative of the weather that you've provided for us.
Oh, think nothing of it, sir. We always arrange that for our really distinguished visitors. By the way, Mr. Holmes, I was reading one of your friend's stories about you last night. The one called The Adventure of Mysteria Lodge.
That was, Wisteria Lodge, you foolish fellow.
Well, maybe it was. Anyway, I was reading it aloud to me old woman. And if you don't mind my saying so, Mr. Holmes, we both thought you made a bad mistake.
Oh, really?
Though, of course, you come out all right in the end.
Dear me, Sergeant, I stand reproved.
Excuse me, Sergeant. Holmes, look. Look at that figure standing by itself right at the end of the pier.
Mm-hmm. Our friend Wilson, the Canary trainer.
He's got a revolver.
Here, we don't want any of these goings on in Kingsgate.
Come on.
Here, you. What are you doing waving that revolver about?
Keep back, the three of you.
I'm the law here. Don't you tell me what to do.
Keep back, I say. I'm not afraid to fire.
Do as he says, Sergeant. You don't want to trifle with. Just exactly what are you up to, Wilson?
You caught up with me once again, Sherlock Holmes. But this time you're not going to send me back to a prison again. And maybe the gallows. If I can't escape you, then I'll take my own way out with this revolver.
Wilson, what in thunder are you talking about?
The murder at the inn last night. I did it.
Murder?
I'm confessing in front of the three of you. So you leave my wife alone. She didn't know anything about it. Now, I hope you're satisfied, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
He's pointing the revolver as he heads.
Wilson, you fool, stop it!
Strike me pink. He done it. Over the pier and into the sea.
Get help, Sergeant. It's possible he isn't dead.
Right, sir.
Come on, Watson.
Going back to the inn, I suppose.
Of course we are. We've just heard a murder confession, but we don't know who has been murdered.
Holmes, what was the telegram that you sent off just now?
A message to my brother, Mycroft. The innkeeper informed me that Basil Carter, the young diplomat we met yesterday, came in rather hurriedly in the early hours of this morning. Come on, let's go upstairs.
Well, we'll have to break the news to Mrs. Wainwright, I suppose.
Before we do that, I think we'll see if Miss Victor's in her room. Which one is it?
Here, top of the stairs.
We'll take the liberty of looking in. Miss Victor hasn't been seen since last night. Uh-huh. Unlocked.
Lord, what a mess. Clothes strewn all over the place, open suitcases.
Yes, it
Look
looks
at
as if the young lady had been planning an immediate departure.
Where can she be? No one's seen her since last night.
Oh, I beg your pardon, gentlemen. I thought I heard Mary Victor come in. I'm Mrs. Wainwright.
Mrs. Wainwright, I'm afraid we have some rather bad news for you.
Your husband shot himself a quarter of an hour ago at the end of the pier, and his body fell into the sea.
Is he dead?
We must presume so, madam. I left the police sergeant there searching for him. Sergeant Blake should be back here any moment now.
So he did it. After all.
You don't seem very surprised, madam.
He threatened to do it.
Mrs. Wainwright, before your husband shot himself, he confessed to committing a murder in this inn last night.
A murder? Whose murder?
At the moment, we're not quite sure.
Oh, he must have been out of his mind.
Mrs. Wainwright, I'm afraid I must ask you some rather painful questions. Are you aware that your husband was a criminal, that he served a prison sentence under the name of Wilson?
Yes, I knew that. He told me when we were married 2 years ago. But he said that he'd gone straight ever since he'd come out of prison. That's why he changed his name. He was trying to make a fresh start.
You know no reason for his planning to kill anyone at this inn?
None. And unless you find someone murdered, I wouldn't give too much thought to it.
Yes, if you'll forgive my saying so, madam, you seem remarkably unmoved by your husband's tragedy.
Why should I pretend? We were very unhappy together. This might be the best way out of it for both of us.
Oh, my soul.
My husband carried quite a large amount of life insurance. In the event of suicide, would that be payable?
Depends on the policy, madam. But I must say that from your attitude, I begin to doubt whether your husband is dead.
What do you mean?
I mean that if Mr. Wilson, or if you prefer it, Mr. Wainwright, wished to disappear in spectacular style, what could be simpler than to pretend to shoot himself, drop into the sea...
Mr. Elm!
I'm up here, Sergeant. Ah, did you find him?
Yes, Mr. Elm. We fished him out right away. Dead as a doornail. Shot himself to the head, he did.
Well, that disposes of your last theory, Holmes.
Did you find the revolver, Sergeant?
Yes, ma'am. Got it right here with me. One bullet missing. Have you found out if anyone here's been murdered, Mr. Elm?
I found out very little as yet. Wait a moment. Listen.
I don't hear anything.
Exactly, you hear nothing. Yet we're within a few feet of the Wainwright's room.
What do you mean, Mr. Elm?
I mean that there is one sound we should be hearing very clearly at the moment. Why didn't I think of it before? The sound of your canaries chirruping. You've heard little else for days. Come on, Watson.
Where are you going?
Your room, madam. I'm afraid I must dispense with asking your permission.
You're already in my room. It seems a little late even to mention the subject.
Here's the bird cage on the windowsill. Oh, the birds are gone.
No, old chap. If you look more closely, you'll see them on the bottom of the cage.
Let me open this door and get one of them out. By Jove, Holmes. They're dead.
And yet when we entered the inn a few minutes ago, they were still chirruping.
But who on earth would want to kill a couple of birds?
That, my dear fellow, is one of the things we have to find out. So far, I must admit I'm puzzled. We have a self-confessed murderer, and the nearest thing we can find to a corpse is a pair of dead canaries.
And now back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. Strange events are taking place in the Kentish fishing village of Kingsgate. A self-confessed murderer has committed suicide, but his victim cannot be found. As we rejoin our story, the great detective and his old friend Dr. Watson are once again examining the room of Mary Victor, one of the missing guests.
You know, Holmes, the murder that Wilson confessed to before he committed suicide might have been the killing of those two canaries.
I think not, old chap. Wilson obviously loved the creatures and kept them in spite of the fact that they were dangerously apt to identify him with his criminal past. Uh-huh. Interesting. Very interesting.
Huh? What have you found?
This note lying on Miss Victor's dressing table. Here.
Let's have a look. You think you can hide from me, Mary, but you can't. Wherever I go, I shall follow you. So why not get wise to yourself and stop running away? Sounds as if the poor girl was in danger, all right.
Possibly, but the writer of that note was certainly obliging. Though the letter is unsigned, he at least gives us a clue to his identity.
Oh, what clue?
The phrase, get wise to yourself, is very un-English. It's American. Come on, old chap.
Well, where are we going now?
The envelope to this letter has the Kingsgate postmark on it. I should be surprised if that fount of all knowledge, the village postmistress, can't help us find an American visitor.
Yes, I know the young man you must be looking for, gentlemen. His name's Walter C. Bunker. He's been in here to send telegrams, and his accent's so strong you could cut it with a knife. Just like one of the Red Indian fellows you read about, you know.
Can you tell me where he lives, madam?
Well, that I can, sir. He's been rooming at Mrs. Bell's house, 15 Laburnum Grove, down behind the gas works.
15 Laburnum Grove, Mrs. Bell. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very much obliged to you. Mrs. Bell?
Yes, sir. What can I do for you, gentlemen?
Well, we understand that Mr. Walter Bunker has been staying with you, madam.
That he has. A nice young American gentleman.
Is he at home, may I ask?
No, sir. And I'm worried about him. This morning, when he goes out, he asks me what the nearest cemetery is.
Cemetery? Oh, gracious me. Huh?
I tell him, and then he gives a queer kind of laugh. I'm not sure I'll see you anymore, he says. And then he walks off, and I haven't seen him since. I tell you, I'm worried about him, gentlemen.
And where is the nearest cemetery, Mrs. Bell, the one you directed him to?
About 3 miles from here.
Mm-hmm.
Just this side of Branson Woods.
Thank you, madam. Come on, Watson. The cemetery seems deserted. Shh. There's music coming from the church.
Good Lord, it's a funeral.
Or a wedding. Come on.
By Jove, it is a wedding, Holmes.
I'm afraid we're on the false trail, but we'd better make sure.
Quiet, gentlemen, please. The ceremony is just ending.
Just one question. Can you tell me the names of the couple who've just been married?
Miss Mary Victor from the inn, and a young American by the name of Bunker.
Thank you. Yes, we have been following a false trail, confound it. The frightened young lady was merely frightened by her persistent American fiancé.
The threatening letter that he sent her.
Ambiguously worded, when you come to think of it. Anyway, we can cease to worry about Miss Victor. She is now Mrs. Bunker. I think we can assume that she's out of all danger.
We've got to start all over again.
Oh, no, my dear fellow. The field is narrowing. We'll head back to the inn now, and I have a feeling that we're on the last lap of our strange adventure. Yes, here's another suspect eliminated. This telegram is from my brother Mycroft. I telegraphed him earlier on today to check on the movements of Basil Carter, the young man who left the inn so mysteriously in the early hours of this morning. His answer informs me that the gentleman in question was recalled to the Foreign Office suddenly and arrived quite safely a few hours ago.
Well, now I'm completely puzzled.
And I, old fellow, at last see daylight.
Wish I did, Mr. Holmes.
Sergeant, go upstairs and get the dead man's widow and bring her to my room, please.
Right.
And then I think I can give you the solution to this problem.
What do you want with me, Mr. Holmes?
Listen, madam. You and Sergeant Blake make yourselves comfortable. Now, in the first place, the murder occurred this morning and not last night.
I know what you're hinting at. The Canaries. I admit I killed them. But you can't do anything to me for that.
Why did you kill those birds?
I hated them. As much as my husband loved them. And when I knew he was dead, their singing drove me mad. And so I killed them.
But they must have been already dead when we told you of your husband's suicide.
True, Watson, but the lady was fully aware that her husband was dead when we informed her of the fact. You see, she murdered him.
You're talking rubbish.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. How could she have murdered him? We saw him shoot himself before our eyes.
Because when Wilson raised that revolver to his head, he was convinced that it contained blank cartridges. Unfortunately for him, his wife had deliberately replaced the blanks with live cartridges.
But great heavens, why? How?
Let me reconstruct the case for you. Wilson, with the connivance of his wife here, had contrived a disappearance plot. He knew that I had spotted his real identity, and so he planned this rather dramatic exit. Confessed to a non-existent murder, and then, well, had his plan materialized, he was to shoot himself with a blank. Fall from the pier, an apparent suicide.
What a fantastic scheme, but how did he plan to get away?
Well, he would have swum under the water, safe distance, and so made his escape.
Oh, his plan couldn't work possibly.
No, probably not, not. But at least it was ingenious. He would have destroyed his true identity and have had his revenge on me by making me search for a murder that had never been committed. Unfortunately for him, his wife was his accomplice and saw in the scheme an excellent way of killing her husband.
You think you're so very clever, Mr. Holmes, but if it were true, How could you prove it?
Observe this revolver, Mrs. Wilson. It's the one your husband shot himself with.
What can you prove from that?
Ever hear of fingerprint tests?
I've heard of them. But that revolver's been underwater.
True, quite true. But thanks to the research of my excellent friend, Dr. John Thorndyke, an infallible test has been discovered for recording fingerprints even after immersion in seawater. What? I applied the test to the prints on the revolver and the bullets and compared them with some that we found on the water glass in your room. They are the same, Mrs. Wilson. Now, does a man let his wife load his suicide weapon? Sergeant Blake, I think it's obvious that the time has come for you to take over the case.
All right, so I did change the bullets. I hated him. I'm glad he's dead. And what's more, I'd do it again.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes, Sergeant Blake?
Well, now that I've taken Mrs. Wilson to the station, booked her on a murder charge, I wonder if you'd mind answering a question.
Well, sir.
This fingerprint test. I'd like to know about that. I never heard of being able to take prints after a revolver has been handled 2 or 3 times and soaked in salt water.
Yes, Holmes, and I'd like to know, when you performed the test and took the prints off the glass in our room, I thought that I was with you all the time.
You were, my dear fellow.
Well, then,
I can give you the answer in one word. Bluff.
What?
There is no such test, my dear Watson. It would be almost impossible to expect clear prints after so much handling, and totally impossible after submersion. Fortunately for us, though, Mrs. Wilson was gullible enough to believe me and give me a confession.
And there's no such person as Dr. John Thorndyke?
Oh, yes, indeed there is. A great success last year in the case of the Red Tarmac.
You didn't tell me about that case, Holmes?
No, I didn't. It was deliberate, old chap. With your taste for writing sensational stories, I was afraid you might publish the affair.
Oh? Would it have mattered if I heard?
Oh, yes, it would.
Huh?
You would have given away, what shall I say, professional secrets. You would have provided the public, and in particular the criminal public, with a complete education on fingerprints. And when that happens, my dear Watson, we shall have no tricks left. That will be a sad day for detectives.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of Wisteria Lodge. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. This is Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petri family. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by shortwave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invites you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us about another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective Sherlock Holmes.
It began on a summer evening in 1906. I'd been for a long walk in the park, I remember, and when I returned to Baker Street and entered our rooms, Holmes looked up at me with a twinkle and spoke.
You look positively glowing with health, Watson.
Well, I had a splendid walk, my dear fellow. You should have come with me. The park was looking particularly beautiful.
Well, old chap, during your absence, I've decided to write another monograph.
Oh, well, what's the subject this time?
Occupational liability to murder. For instance, the mortality rate is naturally high among policemen and detectives. Physicians are murdered with fair regularity, but the murder of a dentist is rare. And who ever heard of a murdered veterinary surgeon?
It's quite true, but what's the occasion for this little homily?
I've been browsing over my newspaper clippings.
Yeah?
You recall ever hearing of a murdered tobacconist, Watson?
No, I can't say that I do.
Oh, why? And yet my clippings inform me that no less than 3 tobacconists have been murdered in the past 6 months, and all the murders have occurred in the same small shop at the East End of London. Now, why do you suppose 3 tobacconists would be murdered in the same shop? Come now, fellow. Give me a logical solution to the problem, will you?
Well, let me see. You say that the shop's in the East End?
Yes.
Is it near the river?
As it happens, it's on the water's edge.
And supposing the tobacconist shop was the headquarters of a smuggling ring. Perhaps boxes of cigars were unloaded from the dock and brought to the shop. Cigars containing pearls or opium or something.
Watson, my dear fellow, you're doing splendidly. You must walk in the park more frequently. You're positively scintillating.
Oh, no, you're making fun of me.
I assure you I'm not.
You're expecting anyone home?
No, probably a visitor from Mrs. Hudson. Go on with your fascinating theory. Now, why are 3 tobacconists murdered?
Well, because they know too much. Perhaps they demand a share in the profits, so the head of the ring decides to kill them.
Plausible enough, Watson. I really must congratulate you. I can see that I'm very lucky in having a biographer with such a lively imagination.
Thanks very much.
Come in.
Imagination. Oh, hello, Lestrade.
Lestrade, I'm glad to see you.
I hope I'm not intruding.
Not at all, my dear fellow. Come along, sit down.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Anything remarkable on hand?
No, Mr. Holmes. Nothing very particular.
Then tell me all about it, Lestrade.
Can't hide anything from you, can I, sir? Yes, there is something on my mind, and no mistake.
And it concerns the 3 murdered tobacconists, I see. Splendid.
Now, how the blazes did you know that?
Yes, Holmes, that's pure magic.
Not at all, my dear Watson. It's simple deduction. Observe the 5 cigars peering out of Lestrade's breast pocket. They are of a far superior quality to his usual brand. Obviously, the scene of his latest investigation has proffered certain, well, shall we say, professional perquisites. Am I right, Lestrade?
Of course you are. Careful one, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, I'll stick to my pipe.
Well, how about you, Doctor?
Oh, thank you, Lestrade. Right, you. Coronas.
And now, Inspector, tell me about the murdered tobacconists.
Well, how much do you know about the case, sir?
Just what I've read in the papers.
Well, curiously enough, we were discussing the affair as you walked in, Lestrade.
It's a strange business, gentlemen. I only got hold of the old story today when I had a long talk to young Jack Longworth. He's the owner of the shop.
When in relation to Gerald Longworth, the taller member of Parliament who battled so successfully against the slum clearance bill?
His son, Mr. Holmes. Nice young fellow, too. When his father died, he inherited this shop along with a lot of other property in the East End.
Well, how big a shop is it, Lestrade?
Oh, just a hole in the wall, Doctor. Like all the other shops in that part of London. Young Mr. Longworth tells me he first rents it to a man by the name of George Grillet. He lives there with his daughter Lily and made it quite a nice go out of the shop. 6 months ago, when Jack Longworth was abroad, George Grillet has a stroke and nearly kicks the bucket.
Kicks the what?
He nearly dies, Doctor.
Oh, kicks the bucket. That's very good. I remember that.
And then what happened, Lestrade?
Well, while he's in the hospital, his daughter gives up the lease on the shop. A few days later, an Italian takes it over, and a couple of weeks later, he's found with his throat cut.
Did you investigate that first murder yourself?
No, Mr. Holmes. It seemed like any of a dozen killings we get in that part of London. A shopkeeper cut up, his till emptied, no clues.
Well, who was the next tenant?
A Scotchman. Bloke by the name of Mackintosh. A few weeks after he moved in, the same thing happened to him. That time, I did go down there, but I couldn't find out nothing.
Was robbery again the apparent motive?
Yes, sir. But the killing wasn't the same. He was strangled with a silk scarf.
Silk scarf, eh? And who was the third tenant? The man who was murdered yesterday?
A Hindu fella. A man by the name of Mukherjee. He takes it over a week last Friday, and yesterday we finds him knife through the back and his money gone. Of course, I was down there before you could say Crystal Palace. But once again, I didn't find out nothing. No knife, no fingerprints on the till, no footprints. Just a very dead Hindu.
Was young Mr. Longworth a landlord in England when these murders occurred?
Yeah, that's the funny thing about it, Mr. Holmes. He docked at Tilbury yesterday morning. He didn't know nothing about what had been going on.
Well, I imagine he'll have difficulty in renting the shop after 3 murders.
Well, that's just it, Doctor. That's why he comes to me at the yard. George Grillet, his first tenant of the shop, moved back there today with his daughter Lily. And young Mr. Longworth's worried about them. Well, if you ask me, he's more worried about the daughter than he is about old man Grillet.
So the original tenants of the shop are back in residence again, eh? And what do you want me to do?
Well, I thought perhaps you'd be interested enough to come along with me and look at the shop, Mr. Holmes.
I should be very glad to, my dear fellow. Get your coat and hat, Watson.
Oh, that's your... Oh, dear, that wretched instrument.
I'll answer it. Hello? Mycroft. How are you? What? Yes. Yes, he's here now. Why, of course. I'll do everything I can, certainly. Let's have dinner together soon, shall we? Splendid idea. All right, goodbye.
Well, is that your brother, Holmes?
Yes. Lestrade, I do think you might have told me the whole truth.
What do you mean, sir?
I thought your visit was prompted by a need for friendly assistance. I didn't realize that you came here virtually on a government order.
Well, it wasn't just quite like that, Mr.
What's
Holmes.
the government got to do with the case, and how does your brother Mycroft fit into the picture?
Not sure yet. But of one thing we may be certain, there's obviously a great deal more in this case than Lestrade would have us believe.
Why do you say that, Holmes?
You must bear in mind, old fellow, that occasionally Mycroft is the British government.
Nice part of London to take a walk in on a foggy night, ain't it, gentlemen? All our policemen work down here in pairs, you know.
Yes, I don't blame them. It's a vile neighborhood.
There's the shop just ahead of us, with a sign hanging out. Hello. There he is again.
Oh.
See that bearded Hindu skulking off around the corner there?
Oh, yes.
He's been haunting the place ever since I came down here.
So a bearded Hindu haunts the place, eh?
Yes, and yesterday, Holmes, the Hindu proprietor of the shop was murdered.
Exactly.
Well, here we are. I'll go in first.
Depressing looking place, huh?
I'll be out in jiffy.
That's Lily, George Grit's daughter. Helps him with the shop.
Sorry to keep you wet. Oh, it's you, Inspector Lestrade.
Yes, Miss Lily. I brought some gentlemen to see your father. This is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
Pleased to meet you, I'm sure.
Miss Grit.
How do you do, young lady?
Is your dad home?
No, Inspector, he won't be in till after dinner. Went down to the docks, he did, to see about some cigar shipments. Mr. Longworth's here. If you want to see him, we were just having some tea in the back room.
Yes, I'd like these gentlemen to meet him.
Jack, come out in the shop, Jack.
What is it, Lily? Oh, Inspector Lestrade. And this must be Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, I'm sure.
How do you do, sir?
How are you, Mr. Longworth?
I'm very glad the inspector was able to persuade you to come down here, Mr. Holmes. I'm dreadfully worried about this business, particularly since Lily's father insisted on coming back here. I'm afraid they're in great danger, but I can't make Mr. Grillet see it.
Young lady, I wonder if I might ask you a few questions.
Well, of course, Mr. Holmes.
Before your father had his stroke, did he receive any threats concerning his occupancy of the shop?
Well, if he did, he never told me about him. But it wouldn't surprise me. I often told him his biggest enemy is himself. If you know what I mean.
Yes, I think I do, Miss Grillet. When your father had his illness, who decided to give up the lease on the shop?
I did. No money was coming in, and, well, it looked like Dad might be an invalid for life. Of course, I couldn't run the shop by myself. Anyhow, I never did like this part of London. It wasn't the right business for Father.
What was his reaction when you told him you'd given up the lease?
Oh, he was awful angry with me. Said I had no right to do it without asking him.
By the way, we saw that bearded Hindu again as we walked up just now.
He's been hanging around ever since we came back here, Inspector.
Well, has he actually come into the shop, Miss Grit?
No, but he keeps walking by and looking in the window. I'm sure if we both went into the back room or left the shop for a little while, well, he'd come right in.
Then I suggest we give him the opportunity he's seeking. Miss Grillet, I wonder if you and Mr. Longworth would mind leaving the shop for a while.
Of course not, Mr. Holmes.
Make your departure rather ostentatious, shall we say, so that he can't help noticing it. Give us half an hour or so and then come back. Perhaps you wouldn't mind going with them, Lestrade.
But, Mr. Holmes, this is my case.
I know, but in a situation like this, Watson and I work much better alone. We may have to go a little outside the law, and your presence might embarrass us.
You'd never think I was a detective, too, would you?
Very well,
We'll be back in
Mr.
half an hour.
Poor old Lestrade. He gets very touchy as the years roll by.
See, I blame him. I'm leaving him completely in the dark. Come on, Watson. Behind the counter. No, my dear fellow. Not under it, old chap. We lift the flap. So. Now I suggest we crouch down behind here. Come on. That's it. Have you got your revolver, Watson?
Yes, it's in my pocket.
Good. Meantime, make yourself as comfortable as these cramped quarters will permit. We may have quite a wait ahead of us.
Here he comes.
All right, Watson.
Put your hands up. I got you covered with this revolver. Now, my man, what are you doing here?
Who are you?
Never mind who I am. Just answer my question.
I do not speak very good English.
तुम हिंदुस्तानी बात बोल नहीं सकता?
सकता है.
तो तुम इधर आया?
देखने को आस्ती है. तुम्हारा भाई हमको हुक्म दिया.
तुम्हारा भाई? तुम जा नहीं सकता?
बहुत अच्छा. Salam.
No, you don't, my man. Just you stay where you are.
It's all right, Watson. Let him go. He's on our side.
I wish you'd tell me what in thunder's going on. Who that man was and why you let him go.
He's an investigator from the Foreign Office, old chap. Given his instructions by my brother, Mycroft.
Mycroft?
Yes, old fellow. Well, when my brother fails to tell me all the facts concerning this case, I begin to think these triple murders have far greater ramifications than we ever dreamed of.
And now back to tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure. A puzzling case is occupying the attentions of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. 3 murders have taken place in a small tobacconist shop in the East End of London. As we rejoin our story, it's late at night, and Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, accompanied by Inspector Lestrade, are once again walking toward the ill-fated shop.
Well, I don't see that you've accomplished much, Mr. Holmes, except that you've just bought me a nice dinner.
We're making progress, Lestrade. If only by the elimination of obvious suspects. But there's a pattern to this case, and that should give us a clue.
Well, how do you mean, Holmes?
My dear fellow, consider the obvious motive of these murders, and particularly observe the results they've obtained.
Well, the motive's the same in all 3 killings. Robbery.
Oh, no, Lestrade. Don't let the theft of a few pounds from the till blind you to the real motive.
Look. Here's Miss Gridlett now. She's coming out of the shop.
Good evening, Miss Gridlett.
Hello, Mr. Holmes.
Is your father home yet?
Yes, he is, Mr. Holmes. Well, I can't tell you how anxious I am for you to talk to him. I'm going to meet Mr. Longware. He's taken me to the music hall. I should be home just after 10. I hope you'll be able to stay with Dad until then.
Well, don't you worry, Miss Gridlett. We'll keep an eye on him.
Oh, thanks ever so much. Oh, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, Miss Gridlett?
Please don't go into our rooms in a beck, will you? I've left things in a frightful mess.
I quite understand, Miss Gridlett.
Well, ta-ta all. See you later.
Let's go into the shop.
Who is it? Oh, it's you, Inspector.
Yeah, these gentlemen, Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
Oh, how did you, sir?
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Did you meet young Lily just now?
Yes, she told us she was going out to the music hall with Mr. Longworth.
Yes. I'm afraid we had quite a set to about that. A very strong-willed girl, Lily, very strong-willed.
Am I to assume that you disapprove of your daughter's association with Mr. Longworth?
Yes, of course I do. He's a toff. He's got lots of money. Lily's so blunt she can't see that he's up to no good. I'm pretty sure he's afraid I might find out what's really at the back of these here murders.
And what is your theory, sir?
Well, I'll tell you this in confidence. Got nothing to back it up now, you understand. There's been talk of widening the docks around here. That'd make property values go up, you see, of course. Well, young Longworth's been trying to buy up all the other shops along the waterfront here, but they wouldn't sell. If you ask me, he's had these murders done just to frighten people away so that he could buy cheap. Now, I'm not saying that he did the murders himself, you understand, but he planned them. Why, in these parts, it's easy enough any night to get a throat cut for a couple of quid.
Yeah.
That's why I'm glad you're here, gents. You see, I just got another warning.
Warning? What do you mean, sir, warning?
Found this note slipped under that door there not 3/4 of an hour ago.
Let me see it, please.
What does it say, Holmes?
I shall call on you at 8:30 tonight. You know what's good for you. You'll be waiting for me alone. If you try any funny tricks, you'll go where I sent the rest of them.
Well, that's obviously from the killer.
Possibly. What's the time now?
Look, it's 8:20.
I was hoping you gentlemen would wait in our rooms back of the shop. You can hear what's going on in here, and if he tries any rough stuff, you can pop in and grab him.
Just what I was about to suggest myself, Mr. Gridlett. Either way, will you?
Oh, yes. Just step behind the counter, gents. Now, through here. Here we are. Not exactly Buckingham Palace back here, but you can make yourselves comfortable, can't you, gents?
Oh, don't you worry about us, Grillet.
Oh, I better turn out the gas. If this bloke spots a light under the door in here, he might smell a rat. Now, there we are. Now, as soon as I see him coming in the shop, I'll knock twice on the door, like this. And that'll give you the signal that he's here. Is that right?
Right, you are, Grillet.
All right, now keep your ears open, gents. I may need your help.
Where are you, Holmes? I can't see a thing.
Over here, Watson.
You know, I've got another theory why Jack Longworth might be at the back of all this. You listening, Holmes?
Yes, I'm listening, old fellow. What is your theory?
Longworth knows that Grillet doesn't approve of his having anything to do with Lily. So when he goes abroad, he leaves instructions to murder the tobacconist. The assassins don't know about Grillet having a stroke, of course, so they keep murdering the wrong fellow.
Well, that makes very good sense, Doctor. What do you say, Mr. Holmes?
Holmes. Holmes. Where are you? Oh, bless my soul, he's disappeared.
No, I haven't. I was just exploring. Shh. That's the signal.
There goes the front door. Somebody's come in. We'd better go in.
Right, Watson, listen.
We've got to get in there at once.
Open the door. Well, it's locked. Never mind that. Get your shoulders into it. Come on, help me. Come on. Come on, one more.
Poor devil. He's been slashed with a knife. Grillet! Grillet!
What, the killer got away? I'm going to... No, Lestrade, conserve your energy. Your murderer lies there. But that's Grillet. Of course it is. Search his pockets, Watson. I think you'll find a blood-stained knife.
Let's have a look. Good Lord. Here's a razor in his pocket. It's covered with blood. You mean to say that he slashed himself?
Let's slip the handcuffs on him, Lestrade. While he's still play-acting, he may be more difficult to handle when he realizes the game's up.
Take your hands off of me.
Come on, quick. Come on, here. Hey. Come on. Very neat, Lestrade.
Yeah. Well, now that I've knocked a wounded man out cold, perhaps you'll tell me what's going on, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, I'm completely in the dark, too.
Oh, it's very simple, really. Grillet has just staged a fake attack on himself. Fool us into believing that someone else is the murderer.
Yeah, but the threatening note he received...
Composed by himself for the occasion.
Yes, but we heard voices. We heard the shop door open.
We heard Grillet talking to himself. And as for the shop door, that's how he gave himself away.
Well, how do you mean, Mr. Holmes?
Whenever the shop door opens, there's a bell that jangles. You will notice... So.
Yeah, that's right, there is.
There was no bell jangle when we were in the back room. Grillet got us in there, locked the door on us unobtrusively, and staged his little drama.
Yes, but we heard the door creak open and close, Mr. Holmes.
The creak of this flap in the counter would sound exactly the same, my dear fellow. Now listen.
Yes, but why, Holmes? How did you spot that Grillet was a man?
It was obvious from the beginning that since nothing had changed about the shop except the ownership, that the attackers were directed against any tobacconist who was not Grillet himself. Of course, his daughter, Lily, obviously knew what was going on.
Well, I don't see how you figured that one out, Mr. Holmes.
Every remark that she made showed that although she loved her father, she knew his failings. In any case, she gave me the final clue.
Well, what clue was that?
In very pointedly asking me not to go into the back room of the shop. Of course, she meant the reverse of what she said. I followed her advice when you were explaining your theory to Lestrade.
Well, what did you find, Mr. Holmes?
Miss Grillet had obligingly left a secret door open, a door leading to a passageway that seemed to go down to the waterfront. We'll examine it more thoroughly in a minute.
Yes, but I still don't understand Grillet's motive, Holmes.
Neither do I, old chap. No, I suspect that from the interest of the Foreign Office in the case, this shop has been the headquarters of an espionage ring. I'm afraid the final answer to that question will have to be given by someone else.
Oh, who, Holmes?
By my elder brother, Mycroft. Humiliating, isn't it, Watson?
And what was the final answer to the question, Dr. Watson?
Well, Holmes was right as usual, Mr. Foreman. The shop had been the headquarters of a spy ring operated by Grillet. And many international criminals had been smuggled in England or foreign ships moored up the river.
And did Mr. Grillet hang for his crime?
No, he didn't, my boy. Before he came to trial, he He had another stroke and he died.
Probably just as well for his daughter's sake.
Oh, his daughter. Yes, a lovely girl.
Did she marry Longworth?
Indeed she did. As a matter of fact, I danced at her wedding. It was a very wonderful wedding reception. See, you would have been there yourself, Mr. Foreman. In fact, you'd have liked it very much. They served a pretty good wine.
Was it a Petri wine by any chance?
Oh, well, it was so good it easily might have been.
And now, Doctor, do you feel like giving us a hint about next week's story?
Yes, I do. Next week, Mr. Foreman, I'm going to tell you a strange adventure that happened to Holmes and me in the West End of London. It concerns the death of a famous actor who was portraying the part of an equally famous man, Sherlock Holmes.
Thank you, Doctor. See you next week. And say, from the news we've had so far today, maybe by next week at this time we'll hear some really good news from Europe.
I certainly hope so, Mr. Foreman. But let us remember the war won't be over when Germany quits. We've still got to lick Japan. And that's going to take a long time. So instead of celebrating when VE Day comes along, let's just strengthen our resolve to support the war more than ever here at home. Keep that war job. Don't leave it till you're released. Keep on buying more and more and more war bonds and keep them. Don't turn them in. Help all you can with all home front activities and observe all our wartime regulations such as price ceilings. That's the real way to celebrate a victory in Europe, by working harder to end the war in the Pacific.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is based on an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of the Six Napoleons. Mr. Rathbone appears with the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Mr. Bruce with the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. This is Bill Foreman saying goodnight for the Petri family. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.